This is Sarah Tebow, and I am the host of the Side Woo podcast. Join me for conversations about mental health and metaphysical issues from the lens of living a more creative, fulfilling, and connected life. From the physical to the metaphysical and beyond, welcome to the Side Woo. If that's cool.
I'm not at home. I'm at a lake in Virginia, but yes.
Oh, where in Virginia are you?
Bumpus?
Oh,
Yeah, spelled bump ass. Yeah.
hey, bump ass,
Yeah.
what? Like
Yeah.
its sister city is Twerk or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty rural and around a lake that my wife's family rented a house out here for a few days, so
Oh, that's cool. It's funny because I
downtown.
worked as a recruiter for the DMV area, and so I learned all about the cities of that, like those three states.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I feel like Virginia has a lot of names that like aren't pronounced the way they look.
Yeah.
Like Bowie, like the Bowie, David Bowie is a
Yeah.
city in Virginia, but they call it Bowie.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was like, why?
They're Southern.
They're
Yeah.
Southern. Oh no, that's just the explanation to everything. We don't know as Northerners.
I grew up in Texas where people have wild draws and yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so for listeners, I have Scott Ogden on right now, who is the director of Shrine, and it's a gallery both in New York and Los Angeles. And he was the spearhead of the talk that I did with Hayley Barker, which will be following this conversation. But I wanted to give Scott a chance to do a little bit of an introduction. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything
Yeah.
you want to say that, like, there's so much to talk
Sure.
about with it.
Well, I love that you first wrote me, and then, there's all sorts of, with so many artists, there's so many inquiries and things that come our way that are exciting, but obviously not everything can happen. But I love that, I don't know, the email you sent initially really caught my attention, and Haley knew about the side woo, which I thought was awesome. And
Yeah.
I just love that it's coming together and you guys were able to talk. And for anyone about to listen, the conversation was really on. I think you both really were in this amazing group together and talking about Haley as an artist, but even deeper, like as a person. And I think
Hmm.
as someone who has a gallery and works with artists, it's all about those relationships and getting to hear the artist in their own words describe what they do or seek to do. And yeah, it's always special.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, and
yeah,
it was nice for me that she didn't have any set talking points that she really wanted to get across, because it always creates like a more open and
yeah,
winding conversation that I think you end up getting more out of it, rather than like if someone has like the three things that they really want to say.
yeah,
It can be a little limiting and take things, it can be the more you try to control things, usually the less they
right.
go.
It felt very fluid. And I love that it was centered around this book because as a gallery, I've always been drawn, as an artist in a gallery, I'm always drawn to the visual nature of this field, and books are sort of what got me intrigued in self-taught and outsider art in America, art brut, and then
Mm.
even deeper all throughout contemporary art. And this was our first book that we got to launch together. And I think it's really
Yeah.
nice to talk with you and Haley, sort of also centered around this book that documents roughly like the first 4.5 years of our collaborations in New York and
Okay.
online as well, because we met right at the onset of the pandemic. And I think her first show was her physical show was October 2020, so deep in the heart of it.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
Neither of us had met one another in person. I had never seen her works before they arrived. And then it was just an amazing first encounter. We really hit it off. And then the show was so beautiful. It came together better than either of us probably imagined. And it led to, I don't know, this last few years where I've changed so much as a gallery. I think Haley has changed and evolved and grown as an artist, while still keeping true to those earliest impulses and style in her work.
Hmm.
It's exciting to have two events together that for me center around my connection and relationship with Haley, and also like how we documented that kind of connection with an artist, but also for the first time in a book form. So I don't
Mhm.
know, it felt really special. I was so excited that Artbook was open to host us. They were
Yeah,
perfect, and Hauser and Wirth for having that amazing complex and letting it
it's amazing.
all happen. Yeah, the whole thing felt very generous.
And when did you in the process decide you wanted to make a catalog of her work?
That's funny. I've always wanted to do books through the gallery and intend to do more. I think it was pretty organic. It might have even been someone we work with named Marge. I think we were just going through all of the images from the last few years, and I think it was just one of those sort of group gallery meetings where like we should do a book of all of this. There's been a rightly so a lot of interest in Haley's works, and
Yeah.
they're obviously, inviting. They're all usually set in her home or in spots they're documenting locations or gardens or special places to her that are very
Mhm.
close to her, so they feel very inviting, and I think I don't know, it really having those works sort of inspire us and our audience through the pandemic, which was kind of bleak, obviously, and
Yeah,
it was a real light point,
that's
and I
cool.
think it just sort of naturally seeing the works she created and sort of the evolution and line of how they shift and grow and her topics and subjects change, but there's this real continuity to what she does. So I don't know, it felt important
Yeah,
to document it in a different way. We've done online projects together several times,
yeah,
physical exhibitions, but there's just something so nice about the analog nature of a book. And I don't
agreed.
know. Yeah,
And you meaning both of you, organized 3 writers to contribute to the catalog or book,
we do.
Linda Montano, Barry Schwabsky, and Sarah Gottesdiener. So
Yep.
who was involved with that decision?
Barry has been enamored with Haley's work and wrote about her first show at the gallery during the pandemic, which was so amazing for Art Forum. And
Yeah,
I
so
think
cool.
he's a writer, but also someone who just really gets intrigued and interested in following these artists beyond just writing about a show. And he's definitely been following her career since then. So he was a really we both loved what he wrote for Art Forum, so we were hopeful that he might write an essay, and he did.
Cool.
Sarah is a friend, of Haley's. I think they sort of
Yeah.
share being a witch in common, and they've also bonded through art, and I think just a love of similar artists and kind of ideals, and the way they most likely live their lives is in alignment through their sort of practice of being a witch and their attention
Mhm.
to nature, appreciation for all of those things that I'm still learning about. So it was fascinating to learn more about that through Haley and Sarah's writing.
Oh, is that right? Have you picked up any, like, witchy practices since getting to know Haley?
Actually, she sent me this beautiful candle, um, a while back that has these rocks embedded in it. I'm spacing out
Mhm.
on the company's name. It'll come to me in a minute, but they're like really well-known candles.
House of Intuition or
House of
something?
Intuition,
Yeah.
we love them, and she sent me one of those, and since then, I felt it really did something. Every time we lit it, that something unique was happening, and I
Oh, wow.
definitely have always been a person who's kind of, innately seen I've seen some spirit type ghost things throughout growing up. I've always been in touch with, like, believing there's a lot out there, so the
Okay.
candles have been something we've really adopted and we still love having in the gallery, but also, I think the sort of altar building she does, she always keeps a
Mhm.
real uh, beautifully set altar in her studio, and I think I've found myself starting to arrange things with intention, even if it's a bit abstract. But to organize the stones out of these candles along with some other things that feel important to me, and I think
Mm.
we're slowly I think it's sort of once you're open to that, I'm, like, interested in learning a lot more about it, but I've
Yeah.
always
Well
felt I was intuitive and tapped into
mhm.
things in strange currents, so I think it would be interesting to learn more about it, but she's definitely I love hearing about how she lives her life through that vision and sort of
Mhm.
how it all draws back to nature at its core and
Mhm.
being good to one another. It's those things that we really used to take for granted that are, you know, less and less around us, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And we go into that during the talk, a little bit about
Yeah.
like why the book is called Alter, so I won't
Yep.
spoil it. But was that a collective decision or was that something Haley was really set on or
We were throwing several names around, but Alter was the one that really stuck with her and the one that I think she had several, I think, earlier concepts for the title, but when Alter came to her, it was like, yeah, that was what she wanted to stick on, and I think it's perfect in a sense. The book's sort of this metaphorical altar. It's like this thing she's left behind, gathered together
Mhm.
and organized in a way that felt important and meaningful, even through their arrangement to us, the way the essays unfold, the way the images build. I think the altar really suits not only her personality as a witch and artist and how she operates through life, but I think the book sort of functions for all of us like an altar because I really felt it hard to let go of it. I made a film about 12 years ago, I think now, on self-taught artists, and it was like a
Oh, you
multiple
did?
year endeavor. It was called Make, and I just my friend Malcolm and I edited and co-directed it, but I really couldn't let it go. I just kept wanting to make small tweaks, and finally he told me, he's like, "Sky, it's done." And I was like, "Okay." And, with the book, I felt myself going down that rabbit hole, but
Mm.
it wound itself together much more quickly, and I think I don't know, I just love where it landed. I often second guess things, and I just when I do something or am involved in something that I love where it finalizes, I don't know, it's exciting. Like, I wouldn't change anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gorgeous book, like, the cover has, like, gold embossing, which I'm, like personally, that's, like, crack for me. I'm like, "Ooh," like,
Me
shiny
too.
and
Yeah,
and
shiny.
texture. Would you mind talking a little bit about your film that you made? I'm super curious. That's the first I've
Sure,
heard of
yeah,
it.
it's not a project we ever intended to make money with. I started before I had a gallery. I've always, as an artist, I was deeply interested in a lot of the artists in America that were self-taught, no formal training, but even beyond that, sort of those really different life circumstances that make how they create art something very unique.
Yeah.
Many times not understanding they're making art, but this creative drive pushes their other purpose, which one of the artists in the film is Hawkins Bolden, who went blind, I think, at 7 or 8 years old, but then later in life made hundreds of scarecrows using found materials from his local alleys and
Oh my
empty
god.
lots and made these found object assemblages that were scarecrows to him, but they're so powerful. They hold so much energy and they're so deeply consistent with the style he developed. So you see one, you know it's him.
Mhm.
Yeah, the artist it was called
Wow.
Make. To me, it's just about that creative drive people have to make something.
Mhm.
And it features Prophet Will Robertson, who lived in Baldwin, Louisiana, and he's passed away in 1997. Ike Morgan was a self-taught artist in Texas who's still living and active. Hawkins Bolden, who I was just telling you about, who lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and was blinded and made the scarecrows. And then Judith Scott, who's perhaps the most well-known of those artists who worked at Creative Growth Art Center, which
Mhm.
is this amazing nonprofit in Oakland that helps support artists with physical and mental disability to be full-time artists in whatever way they decide they want to be artists. And yeah,
Mhm.
meeting Judith Scott was incredible. She was not only born with Down syndrome, but also they didn't realize till much later in her life deaf. So she was quite
Oh, wow.
in a different she just had a different way of communicating and maybe
Mhm.
understanding and processing the world. But she started at Creative Growth by like sort of coveting and grabbing and even stealing objects left around the studio, and then she would almost tie them into groups, start yarn and fabrics and all sorts of textiles to basically mummify and make these things into these built out, padded, soft forms, all created of textiles that had all these underlying pieces that were things that were important to her and she was tucking away for herself in the work. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of story
No,
is
that
just
sounds amazing. I mean, I loved like, I spent a little time at Creativity Explored, which is like
oh
the
yeah,
San
they're amazing.
Francisco-based
Yeah.
iteration, and then, not to sound, like, weird, but their sales at holiday time were, like, epic, like, the best art you've ever
Oh,
seen, and
yeah,
everyone was like
and so affordably, and everyone can collect at that level, which is so exciting.
exactly, very
Yeah.
accessible, and they make so much work because they don't have anyone telling them, like, "Oh, we don't
Yep.
want any more of these hitting the market," so they're just, like, producing for the sheer joy of it, and
Yeah, there's something about that, and I think that's what Make tried to highlight, and if anyone ever curious, it just exists on our website. You can stream it for
yeah.
free always, and it's one of those things. Having a gallery is obviously a commercial endeavor, but also creative, but whenever I feel like I don't know, whenever I watch it, it reboots me to where I started, and it was just more about the, obsessive love I had for art and all the different things people can do, and it's important for me every so often just to remember that because there's all sorts of things to attend to in terms of a business and
Yeah,
yeah, so I always like to see it, and yeah, despite never having wanting to finish it, I'm really happy with where we left it, and we had all these
really.
amazing musicians contribute original songs,
Oh, so
yeah,
cool.
it's a really special project.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, one of the other guests that I've had on is Griff Williams, and he and his
Uh,
son produced a movie that did end up going to like, some festivals and stuff. But they
yeah.
recorded like hundreds of interviews with artists, a little bit speaking to what you're talking about, and then could only use like 8 of them, you
Oh,
know,
wow. Yeah.
because you just can only make one movie at a time. So I think that hearing you say some iteration of that is yeah, it's
It's
like, how do you capture all the wonder around you? It's like, I think if
yeah,
you have that impulse I have it too with, like, the Bay Area and all the things that I experienced growing up there and, like or, like, coming into my adulthood there and just being an artist, it's like all these prisms of the art creative experience, like, trying to
yeah.
convey that to others.
Yeah, how do you share it? And
Mhm.
yeah, and also, like, let it go. Like I said, I became too attached to their
Right.
stories when they just lived it so easily and, like, in their skin, so
Mhm.
those lessons are great for me and probably anyone to
Right. Like, the story will get told, you're not necessarily the only person who's gonna
yeah,
do it. Yeah.
yeah.
I love that.
And one small click longer of a scene is gonna make or break it.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah. Yeah, how were you editing? Were you just using, like, at-home editing
M
software
Malcolm Hearn, who's the co-director and one of my oldest friends, he was editing, so he was using I believe at that point it was Final Cut Pro,
or
or
okay.
I'm not sure, maybe Premiere, but yeah, we were just doing it, long coffee sessions, and just, like, whenever we had free days, we just would work straight. And
I love
I
that.
was never intending to make a movie, by the way. It's how I started collecting art. I was visiting these artists and collecting art that got out of hand to the point where a friend was like, "You should maybe start a gallery." And I was like, "What?" It wasn't
Amazing.
something I ever had thought about. I just loved living with art. And Malcolm one day was at my house looking at some footage. My dogs are barking.
Oh, I
Let me
can't hear them. I hear,
are you
like, a little rustling,
Oh,
but
wow,
yeah,
amazing.
Zoom.
Well, so Malcolm came by my house one day, and we were about to go out for dinner or something, but, I had left the room for a minute, and I was looking at some of the footage on Final Cut Pro, and he's an editor, but I'm not. He just quickly had, like, made a scene that was, like, 30 seconds of Hawkins Bolden, and something about the way he arranged it was so different than what I would have ever done. I was like, "Do you wanna work on something bigger?" And he was like, "Yeah." So we just jumped in together, and he started with what we had, and then we did several more trips to visit other artists, like Ike Morgan was still living. He's still
Okay.
living, so we kept filming him, and then we kept digging deeper for archival footage. Um, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love it. And so I guess you kind of roped in something
Should
I
I
was
let
going to
these dogs out? You can't hear them at
I
all?
can't hear them. No, and I've got headphones in and I can't even hear them.
Okay,
Like
that's hilarious.
Zoom's
They are howling.
audio filter is really good, I guess.
Oh, I love that. Let me just let this little one out, and
Yeah,
she'll
go
be
for it. For the YouTube listeners, we're going to be right back.
okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
No
If it wasn't
worries.
gonna be distracting to you, it's probably gonna distract me.
Yeah, totally. No, I understand that. Yeah, I mean, well, one thing you kind of segued into that I had wanted to ask you about was creating your own gallery. And
Yeah.
it sounds like that interest in the like self-made artist is something that was like foundational for your
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, and interestingly, that all ties back to Hayley Barker quite a bit. I was mixing and doing shows, like 2 artist shows with a contemporary artist paired with someone self-taught like Mary Teeman Smith.
Mm,
Um, I was doing that, but my focus was self-taught for the first couple of years at the gallery, and we slowly were inching towards working with more contemporary artists. I also just felt like my safety zone, what I knew best was this sort of legacy of American self-taught, so I was
hmm
primarily doing that. But I remember, so Haley initially sent us an email. We were trying to repiece this together while we were putting the book together, but she first sent an email early on just to say she was super interested in one of the artists we were showing. I think it was Hawkins Bolden and the Scarecrows we had on view at the gallery, and she's like, "Can I come see the show?" And we gave her the hours and stuff, and it was just a quick sort of like, "I'm excited about the show, I wanna come see it. Can I?" Because I think it was obviously still pandemic.
Yeah.
Then I think it was a little while later, she sent me the sweetest note when I was having one of those rough days where I think whether it was bills and gallery just knowing how to do a gallery, 'cause I still everyone's kind of learning on the fly. I had no idea what I was doing, but she sent me the sweetest note just saying she was such a fan
Thank you
of
for being honest about that, by the way.
Yeah, and I was just having a down day at the desk, it was quiet, and the email came in from Hayley Barker, and I read it, and it was just something to the effect of, like, "I'm such a fan of your program and love what you all do, particularly a lot of the self-taught artists I am also drawn to." And she's like, "I hope you're having fun with it, and I'm always curious what's next." And she's like, I think at the end, it was just like, "If you ever had the time and wanted to take a look at my portfolio, here's my website." And the note really lifted me at that funny moment where I was feeling kind of down about whatever it was. And then I looked at her
Yeah.
paintings and I was like, "These are beautiful." And as we're discussing, they were a little bit out of my wheelhouse in terms of what I had been exhibiting at Shrine, but they caught my attention and I thought they were just really lovely and different. So
Yeah.
I think I wrote her back pretty quickly just to thank her and say I thought her website looked amazing and the paintings were awesome and like, let's try to stay in touch. And this was right before the pandemic. I feel like it was a few months before it really hit.
Oh,
And
wow.
when it hit, I was convinced I was pretty much gonna be out of business. I didn't have a lot of there's no backing. It was just my little bit of money in the bank. Um, and then I think it was Hauser and Wirth. I saw they launched the first online viewing room, and I was like, "What is this?" And I looked, and it's like, "Oh, it's a digital exhibition on a webpage." And then my wife and I and some friends she had been touring, dancing with in Europe, they came back and we decided to sort of self-sequester ourselves upstate for 5 weeks. And I just went and
Mhm.
built websites that had e-commerce integration. And I start putting my first show together called Connections. And then I
Mm.
thought back, I was like, who would be in this show about connections when no one has a connection at the moment? And Haley's work, came to mind. And I sent her an email like, "I don't know if you'd be interested in this, and if you are, you would likely have to ship it yourself and photo document it, and who knows what will happen." And she was like, "I'm so into it." Yeah, she was like, "Yes."
Oh,
And
awesome.
she gave me 4 paintings, and then 3 other artists, I think, contributed 4 paintings, and, like, the show did really well. It paid I think it covered my rent and likely some of the artists involved. It all helped us at this real precarious moment,
Yeah.
and I was so excited
Oh.
worked. I kept doing more digital shows, but also I had a show that didn't wanna do an exhibition during the pandemic, and that was the October 2020 exhibition slot, and, I asked Haley, I was like, "Would you wanna do a real, like, gallery show?"
Mhm.
Like, 6 months, so it's kinda coming up quickly, and she jumped on it, which I thought was so cool, and we still had never met each other, and it just sort of came together so amazing, and
That's
finally met her,
great.
saw the works, and it became a real turning point for me. I just loved working with someone directly. So many of the artists I had been showing are deceased, there's no formal artist estates,
Right. Oh,
and there was
sad.
a real celebratory, uh, vibe when you're working with someone and a show does
Right.
well and you start thinking about what could be next, and I don't know, it really was a pivot moment for me where I'm always gonna hold true to where I started, but I also just love working with artists directly. It's my main thing I do day to day now, actually, which is
Right,
fun.
okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny, it's something I wouldn't have occurred to me, but of course, like, you wouldn't get the benefit of that, like, community building when you bring in a new artist and they, like,
Yeah.
have friends or fans, and then you have the dinner, and, like, for me,
Yeah.
like, I did a show in Minnesota, and one of the main reasons I like to work with this gallery is they are really big on their community, and they, like, are part of Minneapolis Art Week, and like, introduced me to all these amazing local artists, and, like, that's, like, what is interesting to me, and but when you're working with artists who are deceased, like, you don't get
Yeah.
any of
And
that.
it's not even a family I can track down in a lot of the cases.
Yeah. Oh,
It's still
no.
amazing because you're
Yeah,
hopefully shining a light on artists who, even if they're not
absolutely.
there to enjoy it, deserve a light on what they did. Yeah, so that part was always exciting, and also just having the opportunity to organize a show and put it together and arrange it of something that I'm such a deep fan of myself, that
Yeah,
was very
that
exciting in the
makes
beginning.
sense. Well,
Yeah,
and I
like
like the idea of, yeah, having the live artist and then the deceased because then you do get that fresh, like,
yeah,
energy in, but then you can also give them a platform for the other artist, and
yeah. It was in
That's
my very
cool.
first small venue, but we did a show with, B. Tom Stevenson and Mary T. Smith, and we covered her she used corrugated metal, so he was like, "Let's cover the gallery in corrugated metal," and they both did all these paintings on wood and metal, and it was just yeah, it was great to have a young, inspiring artist, like, also attracted to this sort of art
Mhm.
that is underknown for whatever reason, often considered folk, but you look at it, you're like, "This is definitely not folk." There's no good
Right.
word for it. I don't think outsider is terribly appropriate either, but, there
It's
is
almost
something
like arte povera, but, like, in the US, we didn't have that.
yeah.
I mean, I don't totally know what you're talking about because 'cause I'm not
But just
familiar
in
with a
terms of
lot of
these
the
artists who
artists.
have, like, more of an affinity with something like art brut and what Dubuffet was sort of
Yeah.
theorizing as opposed to, like, in America, they called all this folk art for
Well,
mm,
yeah, or
for a
I
long
meant, like,
time.
I'm not familiar with the specific artist, but, yeah, I feel
Oh,
like
yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah, but it was just
little
a underknown female Black artist from Mississippi and long gone. I think she passed away in the mid-90s, and then to have this younger artist really intrigued by her and not necessarily he just did his own thing, but their styles were already kind of aligned, even though he just had learned about her. So that it was a
yeah.
cool fit, yeah.
Well, and just yeah, thinking about, like, what you were saying is this idea of labeling something folk if it looks like it was undereducated in its
Yeah,
creation, but then that's really undermining how sophisticated the ideas or the use of
yeah.
materials, even if the materials aren't,
Or
like,
even the simplicity of it. If it
the
looks simple
simplicity yeah.
yeah, yeah, so those kind of things, but those kind of, term issues and all that gets discussed so much. To me, it's all art, and,
Yeah.
of course, there's different I don't know, there's differences between artists and different lives, but it does boil down to all being things that draw you in and make you
Mhm.
think, and I don't know, for me, before the gallery, I just wanted to live with these things because they evolve with you. I'll still see something I've had on the wall for 30 years and notice something, whether it's a little I don't know, it might just be the way the paint fell, or I'll just notice I continually am noticing new things in something I've had
Mm.
around me day to day for 30 plus years, and there's something
Amazing.
exciting in that, yeah.
Yeah, before we go,
Yeah,
I wanted you to be able to talk about the show that you've curated with Haley.
yeah.
But I would love to hear if you have any woo-woo stories since this is the side woo. I would
And
love
woo-woo, I love what would a good example of a woo-woo story be? Is that like a
like a ghost story
oh,
or like a
yeah, I can share a ghost story.
synchronicity that was like too crazy to dismiss.
I've had a lot of, like, little psychic pushes where I've sort of thought something and watched it immediately unfold, but I
Mm,
think the ghost stories are more fun. Um, I remember I was visiting home from college. This is perhaps the most fun. I have some more heavier stories, but, I was visiting home. I was in Austin going to University of Texas, and, like, I had grown up sharing a room with my brother, so I came back home on visits, and there was nowhere to stay because he took over the room,
oh, okay.
and one night, I think my sister slept over at her friend's, so I was in her room, and we had a little, like, Russian blue kitty named Shortcake, and
Oh,
Shortcake
okay.
I hadn't seen her forever, so she was in bed sleeping with me that night, and then all night, she was literally just poking me in the face with her paw, and I was, like, trying to sleep, and I would pet her, and she'd purr, and, like, it just kept happening, and I was, like, wide awake, but trying just to sleep, and I had my eyes closed, and finally, like, she did it again, and I was like, "Shortcake," and I, like, pet her some more, and then I noticed, like, as I'm petting her, she's purring, but I'm like, "I can see her." And she looked up, and there was just a blue light going around the room in circles, like like mellow, not like scary, just like this blue sort of energy light going around the room. And then it just dissipated into an air vent. And I was just like, and then I just like fell asleep. But it was bizarre. And it was definitely one of those things where like everyone thinks you're asleep. Those kind of stories you tell, they're like, you're
Mhm.
asleep. But I was definitely
Like you
aware
were
because
being woken up by the cat to look
cat
at
was
this
waking me up.
blue
Yeah. So I was
thing.
wide awake and she just kept pawing my face and like trying to get me to pet her, but there was also this other thing she was trying to show me, it felt like. So that was kind of a
Totally.
woo-woo
What do you
story.
think that was?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Did
A
you
ghost
get any
spirit?
energy feel out of it or
Uh, yeah, it felt bizarre, but also when I've had these things happen a few times, I passed out after that. I think it, like, kind of was like the adrenaline rush, like, what have I witnessed? I saw a ghost in my house right after 9/11. I lived in Brooklyn in South Park Slope at that moment. And when I was on my way to work, I remember I was about to go down the subway and someone was like, A plane hit the trade center," and I was like, "Yeah, right," and I got on this train, I went, like, 3 stops to, like, a mile and a half, and then they were like, "No more trains into the city," so I had to walk home from, like, Atlantic Center to Park Slope, and it
Wow.
looked like it was snowing. It was all the dust and debris and
Ugh.
everything washed over Brooklyn, and by the time I got to my house, the whole backyard was just like it looked like it snowed. It was all ash. It was like calendar pages that had been burnt around the edges. It was really dark, and then I think that week, I woke up in the middle of the night and I had sort of a house with no doors. It was just sort of like passages, corridor passages from room to the kitchen, out to the backyard, and, like, I woke up in the middle of the night and there was just someone standing in my kitchen to the point where my heart was going fast, and I was, like, doing the pinching thing, and then I could see they had long hair, and they started walking through the kitchen towards my living room and towards the bedroom, and I was just immediately convinced someone was trying didn't know I was there and had broken in or knew I was there and was up to no good. I hopped out of bed, I ran over to the light and was just like, "Hey," flipped on the light, and it
And
sort of
it was
also just
gone.
went away, but it was
Wow.
clear as day while I was witnessing it, yeah. So I've always
Wow.
had those kind of strange woo-woo things, so I appreciate
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Do you feel like the person in your house was left over, like they had
I
kind of
think it was something
stuck
tied
around?
to the horrific nature of 9/11 and someone whose energy was probably displaced during that moment,
Yeah.
and they were
I'm
somehow
sure there was a
living
lot
in
of
my
that.
room or had wandered in from the back because literally, like I said, the whole backyard was covered with stuff. It felt like someone was c in hindsight, it felt like someone was there but didn't know where they were either, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting, like, full body chills as you talk about it. I have no idea why, but, what was it like being in New York during that time? I mean, because I remember
Um,
watching it on TV that morning, and then, of course,
yeah.
everything changed after that, but
It was so intense. I remember my whole family was still in Texas. They're still in Texas. Everyone is in Texas, and my mom afterwards was like, "Well, you're coming home, right?" And I was like, "No, I love New York." But it was this weird moment of communal grief. I have never seen anything like it before, and it was prolonged. It was months, if not
mm,
at least the first full year. But I remember it was just you could see it in everyone's faces that everyone was just like shocked and sad. But there was also this beauty in every New Yorker because it's a place where there's just infinite numbers of different types of people, but it felt like
yeah.
it brought everyone together in this kind of way where we understood what was lost and also, like, the vulnerability of something that felt so New York City, I don't know, it was powerful. I remember I was getting on the train and spacing out one day, and I bumped into someone who I definitely felt like in another day would have been a big problem having bumped into them, and they were just like, they were just like, "It's
Oh,
cool."
right.
Everyone was just like, "It's cool," and got through it together, and it was really heavy, but it made me love New York way more than I even had started, you know? Yeah, it felt like the city got through it together, which was really interesting.
I really love New Yorkers. I feel like it's
Yeah.
the tourists or the new to New York who are kind of irritating to be around, but, like, real New Yorkers, they, like, lift the stroller up the
Oh,
subway
yeah, you always
stairs.
people
They'll, like
and it's so chatty. If you ask someone a
yeah,
question, they're gonna say something. They're gonna say hi or like, "You go this way." Like, it's actually, like,
yeah.
shockingly friendly as far as I
Wonderful.
can tell. I was very green when I got here, and I grew up in a suburb of Dallas, mostly all white people. It was just I was very sheltered, I think, growing up, and even college in Austin was more diverse, but, like, coming to New York, it was intimidating at first, but it's been, like, so good for me to understand so much more about everybody and just to see how everyone, like, functions. How do the subways work every day with millions of people flowing through the city underneath it? It doesn't seem like something capable of actually happening, and then it happens every day. So, yeah, I love it. I went there for 2 years. I went to grad school in Queens, um, and I thought
Where in
I'd be back.
Queens did you live? Did you
I
live
lived in
there?
Flushing, last stop on the 7 train, and I went
Oh,
to Queens
wow.
College, for my MFA. I loved being thrown into such a different world from where I grew up, and I thought I'd be there for 2 years for grad school and return to Austin or something because it felt very homey there, but it's just New York kept me. Yeah.
Maybe we could finish by just talking a little bit about the show that you
Yeah.
curated.
Yeah, so that's what was so exciting about the weekend of your talk with Hayley, is that Hayley Barker and we've been we always throw around a lot of ideas, but she kind of came to me with the idea that she wanted to curate a show based around self-taught artists and the self-taught artists that we both, have been passionate about in our own sort of separate artistic pursuits. And I thought that
Mhm.
was an awesome idea. So we just the Saturday, I believe it was July 27th, the day before the talk, we opened a show with 14 self-taught artists called Healing Machine. And yeah, I think Hayley put a lot of herself into not only selecting the works, and we curated it together, but it was really she sort of spearheaded the project. But what was so cool about it was it sort of took me back, like this is how we met. She was drawn to this aspect of the gallery initially, and it really was a fun way to reconnect and reflect on those artists that have been influential to both of us as
Yeah.
creative people. And what I loved most about it was, I was like, what is the show? I was like, we can't just put artists together. It doesn't, you can, but it's always so much more interesting when there's like actually an engaging thread or concept.
Mhm.
And she came back with this idea of artists who had sort of a primary purpose beyond art making, whether that was healing. Emery Blagden, who was literally making healing machines in a barn, convinced if you experienced them and spent time with them, they could heal you. To artists like Hawkins Bolden, who made the scarecrows by touch after going blind, who really didn't understand the concept of being an artist. So she had this vision of these artists who explore healing or communion with like the spiritual realm, even extraterrestrials, but
Mm.
artists with a purpose beyond art who like make art, but often were just like that was not the pursuit. And I thought that was brilliant. And I think her writing that and suggesting that sort of helped me coalesce around my attraction to this nature, this work, these artists from the beginning. I've been obsessed with it, but I think she helped me flesh out what it was. I knew I loved it. I knew it was special. The stories were amazing, but I think it was that notion that art can be beyond art in the right hands. And I think all artists
Yeah.
experience that. Whenever you lose yourself in a painting, you're off on a different direction where you're not thinking about your art. You're just in it.
Mhm.
But it's kind of aspirational. These artists existed in that place, I'd say most of them all the time. So it's like a
Right.
very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, well, because you think about the things that block you from accessing that space, and it's like all the things they didn't have,
Yeah.
like a market or a huge audience,
Yeah.
like getting in their
Their
head
their
or,
purpose wasn't a gallery show
Mhm.
or getting into art school or any of that. The purpose was like, oh, I need to put these designs on the face of my house. So if the spacemen come, they'll know I'm here, or in one case, like
Oh, they'll know.
Will
Don't
Robertson was
worry.
one of the artists I got perhaps the deepest on. He's in the documentary, but he had such a tortured and complex life. But there's a scene in the documentary where he's like being interviewed by someone, and they're like, "So you think the FBI and mafia men come and they're bothering you?" He's like, "Oh yeah," and he's like, "And the spacemen too." He's like, "They could be here right now." And the guy's like, "They could be here right now." He's like, "They could be here right now. You wouldn't know." And I was just like, it's like, whoa, like he just existed in this realm where he was
Yeah.
documenting that really
I mean,
powerful
I
and
don't disagree. I feel like,
I
having
don't either.
done
Yeah.
like mediumship and talking to people
Yeah.
who've done like drugs, like
Yeah.
not the drugs, but like DMT, like really
The
serious,
shared
like,
hallucinations and like
like
things coming to people.
it's a frequency. Like I
Yeah.
almost believe that at least some species are operating at just like a different frequency, like kind of the way ghosts are.
Yeah.
And that's like why we can't see them ever,
A
and
great
then
way to
there's maybe,
describe it. Frequency. And I think that taps into the world of like when we see a spirit or a ghost or something, it's like a
yeah.
frequency overlay or who knows, but yeah, that's a,
I mean, who does know? We'll find out, I guess, one day, but
yeah.
when we're done. No.
Maybe. But yeah,
Yeah.
but it was really exciting to put this show on with Haley, but also to have it launch on the same weekend as the book event and your conversation. So it was just a really fun moment to celebrate. I don't know, a lot of different aspects of Haley
Yeah.
Barker, and yeah,
In your relationship, like creative partnership together.
yeah, exactly. And a collaboration, which I think that's when you're working with an artist as a gallery, that's the best way to describe it is you're both got all these ideas of, the business side of it and how to hopefully navigate
Mhm.
that. But also like there's all the fun creative stuff that you get like to have her pitch that and then to have it be realized in the form of this exhibition that, like you said, you had chills earlier. There's a moment where we put three works together on the back wall and like she's like, oh my God, that just gave me chills. I could see her arm was all chills and like that gave
Oh,
me chills. I looked up and like there was something it just feels like a really beautiful show that I'm excited for LA to see because there isn't there's some amazing places like Tierra del Sol, and there's amazing venues and organizations dedicated to self-taught, but it's still also not a lot for being such a large city. So
Mm.
felt like a interesting place to put a show on like this.
And how long will it be up?
It's on view till September 7th, which
Okay.
is exciting because we'll probably have a closing party because a few of the other galleries in the neighborhood are opening September 7th. So we're going to
Oh,
stay open
cool.
today and close it the way we opened it, I think.
Awesome. So Angelinos, come on by
Yeah, please.
September 7th. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Scott. I mean,
Thank
thank
you,
you
Sarah.
for trusting me with the talk, with Haley's
Oh,
talk, but also for being so candid in our
oh,
conversation.
likewise. And I was so impressed with both of you. Yeah, it was really beautiful to watch and be a part of the audience. And being in the audience, I could sense how people were feeling and responding and taking notes, but more responding to what both of you all were saying. And Haley being so candid about her practice and
Yeah.
her immediate world, the larger world, its problems. Yeah, it was beautiful. So I was excited to be a part of it.
Yay. Well, thank you. So,
Yeah.
for watchers and listeners, we're going to go on to Haley's conversation, Haley and my conversation, hopefully with some video. But yeah, thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a great day.
You too. That's all for this week's episode. Thanks for side wooing with us. We release episodes every other week on Thursday. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate, follow, subscribe, and review our podcast for good karma points. Until we meet again in the side room.